Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. Hello. Okay, let us get started. Awesome. Lizzie, would you be able to take over letting folks in from the waiting room?
Yes.
Thank you so much. All right, let's turn on backup recording. Oh, I lost the window. So many things. Hey, Caitlin, welcome. Record.
Recording in progress.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Mel Hauser. I use she, they pronouns. I'm the executive director of All Brains Belong. We're so glad you're all here. Tonight, we're joined by an incredible panel of community members sharing their experiences with trust, relationships, and what it's like to ask for help in a world that often makes that really hard. Let me share screen and get us oriented to our conversation. Before we begin, closed captioning is enabled. You just have to toggle it on at your end if you'd like to use it. Depending on your version of Zoom, you might see the live transcript closed captioning icon. If not, look for the more ... and choose show subtitles. You can do the same and choose hide subtitles if you'd like to turn them off. It looks like there's a lot of new folks to Brain Club tonight, so awesome, welcome. And if you are returning, welcome back. Brain Club is our weekly community education program with a purpose to demonstrate All Brains Belong's approach to neuro-inclusive culture for purposes of shifting broader community awareness of the issues of concern and importance to the neurodivergent community, and to promote new ways of thinking and being in the world, with the idea that by shifting norms here, then you go off into the rest of your life and carry them forth. And that is what the systems change we hope to see in the world. While we hope that this is a place where you feel safe and supported right from the very first time, this is not a support group. This is also not a place for medical or mental health advice. It's not a place to make personalized requests or address personalized situations or needs. It's also not a neurodivergent affinity space. This is a place where all people are welcome to come and to learn. So we invite you to listen, to learn, to observe what a neuro-inclusive space can look like, and to think about how what you're learning connects to your life. There is no one right way to participate here at Brain Club. You can have your video on or off, even if it's on. We do not expect anything of you. Feel free to walk around or move or fidget or stim or take breaks. Do anything that needs doing. There will be a pre-recorded panel for a portion of tonight, during which you can use the chat or observe. And then we'll have time for discussion afterwards, in which you can use mouth words or the chat. Or observation is a valid form of participation. There is never any pressure to interact in any way. In addition to affirming all aspects of identity, it's really important to us that we prioritize the group's collective needs over that of any one individual. And Lizzie's going to put some links in the chat with the full community agreement and some frequently asked questions. So logistically, this will be what this looks like. We're going to watch a 31-minute panel that has been recorded ahead of time, and we will then have discussion to follow. That is my visual support to make sure that the chat is open where I can see it. Now I can see it. Excellent. Okay, if this is your first time at Brain Club, it's okay not to understand what's happening. Please just keep coming back. It might take several times to figure it out. Just we recommend observing the first time or two just to check it out. And as I said, Lizzie's gonna put the frequently asked questions in the chat. All right, so it's a new month, a new theme. Every month we have a new theme. So this month's theme is a matter of trust. Before we launch into tonight's topic, I want to give a special thank you to everyone who has supported Brain Club. Your generosity is what makes it possible for us to create new content and to be able to compensate our community panelists for sharing their lived expertise so that the rest of us can feel less alone. So thank you to everyone who has supported Brain Club. All right, so what we know is that neurodivergent folks have far higher rates of negative social experiences dating back to early childhood and far higher rates of social isolation and loneliness. There are so many different reasons why, without intentional consideration for access needs, that is, what anyone needs for full and meaningful participation, when access needs are not accounted for, and in fact, when society sends the message that there is one right way to do the thing, that message sends, what that says to a person whose access needs differ from the defaults of society. It sends the message of feeling defective and broken. And this often has a long-term impact on people's health. What we know is that everyone has access needs. Everyone with all types of brains has access needs. And because we all have different brains, therefore we all have different needs. Therefore, it is inevitable that sometimes these access needs will conflict. Conflicting access needs, acknowledging it, and making a plan for course correction, that is part of neuro-inclusive culture. These are some of the themes you'll hear talked about in the panel tonight. And often what happens in communication-related discussions, people will say, well, if only I can, quote, make that person understand or make that person do this thing differently. We can't actually make anyone do anything. We can't actually make anyone understand anything. What we can do, though, is we can learn about our access needs and learn how to name them, articulate them, set boundaries around them. Sorry if that sounds radical, that you can't make anyone do anything or understand anything, but I think it's true. With that, thank you to our panelists, Liz Carney, Weaver Goldsmith, Anya Kelani, and Steve Owens. I am going to start playing our recording. And again, if you'd like to use the chat, slowly, intentionally, thoughtfully, as we listen, you're welcome to. Well, hi. If I remember correctly, this Brain Club was your idea.
I mean, I have lots of ideas.
But this is important. This is an important topic.
It's so important, and it's like right up front for me right now. So I just appreciate you being able to like honor the idea.
Of course, of course. And I think there's a lot of people who, I mean, I think, sorry to like go off script, but like there's a lot of people who trust is missing, and there's not even language to describe that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even just bringing the lens through that word of trust, anyway, what do you think about that? Why do you?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think we forget how complex trust is. You know, like we teach little kids, like, trust police officers, trust the helpers, and that makes it seem very simple, but it's actually really complex.
Yes, totally. And especially if you have the kind of brain that derives safety from predictable systems, you've
That's
been
right.
taught that you should be able to trust the helpers.
Right.
And the disillusionment that follows when
That's right.
breakdown of trust happens, I think, is extra intense for our community.
Yes.
Your thoughts? What are your thoughts about why people in this community may struggle with trust?
Well, it's a number of different things, honestly. Um, I mean, we think about the history of the medical field in general, and it has often been rife with mistrust, from all different kinds of populations that you hear about, and then in general from the neurodivergent population as a whole. Historically, it starts with, people of color and indigenous peoples and things of that nature, and you hear the atrocities there. But then as we grow and things modernize, then it starts becoming, okay, you're learning more about neurodivergence, but then the neurodivergent people are starting to really become the forefront and um, really starting to have those instances of mistrust, whether it's medical gaslighting, whether it's dealing with their own personal traumas, family to other personal things. And yeah, it makes it very difficult.
I'm imagining like the Venn diagram of mistrust. So there's just professional mistrust in general, um, professional mistrust specific to healthcare, both present and historical for both of these.
Mhm.
There is mistrust of the people around you who are invalidating you and gaslighting you. So your doctor can invalidate and gaslight you, but like so can, this person and that person and these people that you're spending your time with. And then I think that for a lot of neurodivergent people, right, we talk about like brain-body disconnect as the consequence of trauma. And so it's also like mistrust of self. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I could definitely see how that would come about, especially um because I mean, like, we talk about the definition of gaslighting at its base, and there is that development of self mistrust, because you're, instead of listening to your body and like actively like knowing or owning, like, this is what's going on, you're told so many times that it's not, you don't have an issue, or you're treated as neurotypical or able-bodied, or whatever the case may be. And it gets to the point where that voice becomes your own. And then there is that mistrust. And then there is um, even like self-deprecation in general.
When you think about trust, what comes to mind?
Well, I've got a story, and forgive me if you've heard it before, but it's worth, I tell it a lot because I think it really is instructive. So I was about 2.5 years into my principalship in Albany, and one of my teachers comes in to my office. I had like an open door policy, that's because I'm like, my executive function is so terrible, my door was never shut. But, but she comes in and shuts the door, sits down, and she goes, "I finally have you figured out." I said, "Oh, yeah. When you say something, you actually mean it." And I was like, well, that's how, for an autistic person, that's like high praise.
Totally, it totally is.
It was really striking it made me realize that, wow, that's not the norm.
That's not the norm. It stands out and for when someone has the kind of brain that derives safety from predictable systems, and the predictable system is people tell the truth, that's going to be a really dysregulating experience when someone does not tell the truth.
Exactly. Yeah. And, you know, I think that, like, I'm speaking for myself, it's very hard for me to figure out. I mean, I get really resent it actually when somebody forces me to try to figure out, you know, their coded messages and everything. It, it really isn't helpful. And, you know, I like to reach understandings with people fairly early, like, you know, look, if this is not working for you, just tell me. You know, don't beat about the bush or don't say, oh, that was wonderful, and then like ghost me for the rest of my life. You know, it's
Yes.
I'm a really direct, blunt communicator, and when people aren't direct with me, I don't know what they really mean, and I don't know what they really want. But I usually know that it's not what they're saying.
I mean, I can only really speak for myself, but you know, I was thinking about this earlier today, and I was thinking about how to have trust, you have to be able to be okay with vulnerability. And you know, and I was thinking about how um like struggling with trust, like in a lot of ways, I struggle with having too much trust or not being able to trust enough in the right moments. And I was thinking about it almost like a spigot that I can't really control. Um, like I either have too much vulnerability going on or I've shut it down completely.
yeah. So I mean, I think a lot of you know, a lot of trust stuff is, I think, when you're sort of bathed in an environment that you can't metabolize because your brain just doesn't do a really good job figuring all this stuff out, then pretty soon, you know, the safe default is like, okay, well, just don't trust anybody because I can't figure it out. It's not that you're like a bad person, it's just you can't figure it out.
So you're like opting out of the demands of having to even bother sorting it all out. It's just safer to opt out
And
of
just say, yeah, they're all lying. You know, and but that you know, that causes, I think, that a lot of difficulties um, too. I mean, like because sometimes people are trustworthy. Sometimes people do say true things, and then if your default is to just mistrust everybody, then you miss that.
yeah, yeah. And like it's hard when your social motor plan is don't trust, opt out, unless somebody's like clearly conveying cues of safety, I'm just going to opt out. Like when you layer on this complexity, sometimes it is the safer thing to not have to do the math.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and the other thing, the other piece of it is that, you know, like once, you know, like once I realized I was autistic, it was, I thought it gave me some more agency around that. But when you don't know and you don't know what the heck is going on, then, you know, you don't really have agency to be able to say, okay, in this particular situation, it's worth it to me to, like, you know, suspend my defaults. In this situation, it's worth it to me to like mistrust everybody. You don't have that type of ability to choose before you understand, you know, your own neurotype. And so I would spend a lot of my life just thinking that, you know, not being able to, it not making any sense because I didn't have any framework to make sense of it.
Of course, that makes so much sense. I think that's so common. And whether it is like trust forming close relationships or like any number of patterns, because of course you're noticing the pattern, but you tell yourself that it's your fault. There's something wrong
Yeah,
with you.
exactly. Yeah.
It permeates everything because as people that are neurodivergent or non-able-bodied and whatnot, unless we unless we are identified early on, we are actively fit into this box of able-bodied, neurotypical, and we are, continually pushed to work from that framework. And even whenever that framework is shattered in terms of like our perception of things and us realizing, okay, we're not neurotypical, we're not able-bodied, etc. It's hard to break that programming. And in that sense of things, our world isn't made for our community as a whole. So we're actively having to not only unprogram ourselves from what we've been taught for so long, but then also having to essentially fight the system in order to be able to find what works for us and what can actually what we um where we will actually be able to fit in.
My experience of starting like first grade in this country was everybody telling me how weird I was. So it was never a question of like, am I normal? Like, no, everyone has told me that I'm the weird one. So, like, I don't really like to view the world in an us and them way, but I was taught at a young age that a lot of people do. So that also makes like just building trust with people, like feeling like an other, is tricky.
You felt like other, like an outsider, but it's actually the quote outsider who is most likely to observe the absurdities of a culture and the inappropriateness of a cultural practice and the harm that it perpetuates. Like when you're in it and you don't know that you're in a thing, you just you sometimes don't question it.
Yeah, and I was fortunate in that I I moved to this country when I was almost 5. So I lived in Germany for the first 4 years. I lived in a completely different culture, so that when I moved here, like I had something to compare it to, um, and I honestly I also had Black women in the South who were telling me, don't listen to those little kids. They don't know what you're talking about. They're talking about you are weird and it's good. You should be weird. Stay you, like you're great. And, don't mind them and don't try to be like them. So I got some really good feedback at a very young age. So like I know who I could trust. Like it's not really a question for me.
Which is really important because there's a lot of neurodivergent people who are quote overly trusting and they think people are
Or
loyal when they're not, and they think all kinds of things and they're picking up on cues. I think to your point earlier about people who are saying stuff they don't mean. There's a lot of that goes on, and people get hurt in those contexts as well. So I think that when your threat detection system sounds the alarm and says like this relationship, this interaction, I'm not allowing you to access this, like that's just as well.
yeah. Yeah, and it can get hijacked. Those kind of things do happen to me too. I've definitely had people tell me, like that person that you've known for so long, they're not your friend.
If you put yourself out there and you are vulnerable, and then you have the trust that then you get let down. And oftentimes when I am in that moment of let down, like that feels harder, that feels sharper. And I always go back to myself, like, oh, why did I let that happen? And I really, and I think that that's, maybe that's a lot of different mechanisms going on for us. But I also think it goes back to that trusting in predictable systems. And then when you're let down and let down and let down, if those are predictable systems, I must be in the wrong on that.
It's really interesting. I mean, what comes up for me with that is like the I must be in the wrong is a lens that, I mean, at least speaking for myself, like that comes up all the time. I'm at a Zoom meeting and the host isn't there, but I'm there. I must be in the wrong place, or
Yes.
all the things, right? Because
Yes.
that is the quintessential narrative of a late identified neurodivergent adult.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that this has all kinds of implications. Like even, when I was talking with someone yesterday, I might edit this whole thing out, but like talking with someone yesterday who said that like in general, people are like interacting with people is too hard, so they just don't ever do it because it's terrible, most of the time, and it's exhausting most of the time. And it had not even been a possibility on the menu for this person that um maybe there are safe people. Maybe there are people that, your nervous system can be at ease with, that it doesn't have to feel like so much work. Like that's not been this person's life experience. Unlearning the like social obligation
Yeah,
thing.
it is the obligation, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and there was a lot of times in my life where I'd be involved in a social obligation and I would melt down and be inappropriate. And then, and so I began to really look at social obligation as being like this kind of awful thing.
Yep.
And now there's social obligation, I mean, like we have a lot of social obligation, reciprocal obligation in the ABB community, which is fine. It's not a problem because it's not going to result in, hopefully people melting down because they're overtaxed.
Well, that's really interesting. Like, what do you think that we do that sets that up differently than other environments? Like, I'd have some ideas, but I wonder if you
Well,
do.
I've told you this before. It is the sort of the unconditional acceptance. And, and that kind of, goes back to the theme that we started with, in that, I've told you before, okay, I'm spending all my time just waiting for the other shoe to drop. And, you know, and it doesn't, and that's the great thing is that as long as it doesn't, and it doesn't get weird, then now you begin to sort of train your neural networks up on a new way of being in the world, but it takes a certain amount of time because there's just so much learning.
So much unlearning from all the
Well,
times where that has not been true, right? Like just
I'm talking about 60 years of having your neural networks trained up in a certain way that leads to you feeling like, oh, I'm a schmuck, It's
no, totally. Any thoughts about how trust and asking for help are related or not related, or how does that play out for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all in the mix. Like you can't ask for help if you don't have a baseline of trust, right? And I think if you zoom out, like I think about like a cultural lens, like so I come from white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism, and independence is like comes before everything else. And that was certainly, like um, uh, pushed into me from a very young age. And then I think about like gender stuff. And as a person who was born an acculturated female, like we are the ones who help others. So there's not really like a dialogue or a script for asking for help. Um, and then I think about like there's a PDA layer there for me. And so like if I do make myself vulnerable, like that's a moment where the balance of the relationship becomes off kilter. And at that point, um, it feels bad. It feels bad because if someone helps me, then I owe them. And are they going to ask me to come back at a time where I don't have the energy or the spoons to be able to make it right? And so that feels very threatening to me. And also, like, if I ask for help, I don't want to be rejected. That feels really bad. That is like very energetically costly at a moment where I do not have the I can't afford that cost.
It's hard to ask for help whenever you've been dismissed for so long. And that same sort of mistrust of self, mistrust of professional, mistrust of personal, um, even whenever you do have that person that attempts to try to validate your concerns or validate the problems that you're facing, it's still difficult to accept. Um, and yeah, it really just takes a lot of time to get beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's like a lot of layers to that too. I think for some people it's like, well, I I don't need help. But for a lot of people, that's not what it is. It's a lot of like, I need help, but I can't accept help from you because you're unsafe.
Exactly, exactly.
I even find that when there's cues from the environment or cues from someone in the environment that makes me recognize that there's this discrepancy between how I would otherwise be showing up and how I'm driven to show up now, that feels so unsafe.
Mm.
I notice it and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't want to be here with you. This is terrible. This costs me so much extra.
Yeah, I really relate to that. I feel like I don't let myself get to that point anymore. But I'm not a young chicken anymore. I tend to bounce out of conversations really quickly.
And then there's maybe conflict there, and then that is going to put the relationship into, into a place where I have to maybe reevaluate it, and like, oh boy, this is a lot just for like, you know, to ask for childcare, like it's big. Um, and then I think about, yeah, do I have to just like, am I going to have to like reassess this relationship? Like, is me asking for help and them saying no going to mean that like I have to sort of like demote them as a friend, or, and also like that the asking, like getting the no feels worse than getting the yes feels better. And so like, so that feels off balance. And then um there's like an aspect of it where, okay, they've said yes, that's great. Now there are expectations. They're going to expect some gratitude. And like that often puts me into like a fawning state, and then that doesn't feel good because now I'm having to sort of think about like, well, I need to make sure that this person feels good enough in the helping that they will want to help me again. And the way that I've dealt with that traditionally is just to go straight into a fawn response around that. And then I feel bad. And then the help that I asked for and I got the yes on still feels bad in the end. So like this, like if you, all of that is like not worth it. Gar.
So
I'll
like
do it myself.
you've done the math and the risks outweigh the benefits and your underlying over-rehearsed neural pathways are that you can do it by yourself anyway. And so of course that would be the pattern that continues forth.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and so like it's what the to jump ahead, like what the unlearning is for that is trying to recognize those patterns and unlearn those patterns and try to really question them.
Yeah, and in order to unlearn them, you have to know that they're happening. So like the
Yeah.
self-awareness that you are demonstrating in like being aware of all of these processes that are all happening simultaneously. Like there's all these layers of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've had to, confront that recently with my injury. And I just was kind of like, oh my God, why is this so hard?
Language is hard, but having others that have that language just makes it so much easier for us to be able to both have that sort of therapeutic catharsis of like, oh, so this is what that, what that actually looks like, or this is what I've been trying to describe for so long. And in that same line of the therapeutic response, there's also a bit of growth there too, because not only do you have the words to describe this phenomena that you've not been able to for so long, but then now it's like, okay, now that I have the words to be able to describe it, now I'm able to move forward and actively try to help myself push past this obstacle.
I'm appreciating interrogating this at this point in my life because I have to, and because in order to go forward and be in community, I have to ask for help and I have to feel good about it.
Well, I don't know, part of me wonders if like part of when you say like be part of community, it's like, well, maybe there need to be some elements of the community agreement of how we show up in space together, whereby some of those other things that you brought up before around expectations, the quid pro quo of trading and swapping and like that kind of thing, that feels unsafe because
Yeah.
you're committing today for the future energy that you may or may not have. But when you're in a community of people with dynamic disabilities, like maybe it's okay to just name that, right? Hey, I'm looking for help. By the way, if you have a capacity to help, there's no expectation that you help again or that like I
Right.
help you or like whatever that is. It's just I'm a person whose capacity fluctuates widely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been really a thing about this community that has allowed me to step into the more of this place of vulnerability is that we've all been let down by these systems, and like we all know what the cost of asking for help is, and we all know, you know, we know what the reaction of a no feels like, and we know what the reaction of a yes feels like. And so like that has definitely helped me sort of like get through to a better space of also being able to like know my access needs enough to ask for the right help. Because a lot of times, like, by the time I'm asking for help, I'm just kind of like a puddle on the floor, and I just want someone to swoop in and save me and just know
Yeah.
know how to fix it. And like really the responsibility that I have to bring to it is to know the help that I need and to be able to ask for it clearly and in a way that that someone else can receive it and can do it confidently. And I think that all kind of like, I think it all comes together in this space of sort of like if we're all kind of learning about our access needs and all learning how to do this communication dance and all learning that it's safe to be vulnerable here, like that this should make that kind of complex soup of trust and help easier.
Easier, not easy.
Right.
Right. And so like it's
It will never be easy.
Rewriting
Yeah.
these pathways. I think in many ways that's like one of the like the core functions that the community has for one another. So it's like, you're seen, you're heard, you're understood, you're believed, all these things. And we're all unlearning and rewriting these pathways together.
That's right. That's right.
So huge thank you to our panelists, Liz Carney, Weaver Goldsmith, Anya Kalani, and Steve Owens. That was a really powerful conversation. I think what stands out to me was just in parallel to listening about these themes, seeing in the chat just like such solidarity of these common experiences that I think, until recently, these are things that have not been talked about and that have really been buried in secrecy and shame. Yeah, I'm wondering, Sierra, I would love to hear what stands out for you.
Yeah, thank you. Everyone. I just two of the points that really stood out to me were one that I think came from Anil about how kind of systemic ableism and neuronormative expectations turn into that kind of internal obstacles to self-identifying, whether that's internal ableism or whatever it is. And then kind of how Weaver talked about just the exposure to multiple cultures can kind of dull that a little bit almost. And how that even if kind of every culture has its own stereotyped expectation of the one right way to be a person or have a brain or have a body, that seeing that that's different in different places, that's different in different communities or different people, can kind of take down some of the power of that expectation. I think it feels like it kind of takes the world rule and turns it into a little bit more of a, oh, this is a brain rule that a lot of people have, but might not be a world rule.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to read in the chat. Kat says, love thinking about solidarity equals connection equals rebuilding neural pathways equals health. Love that. Love that. That's awesome. Yes, because it's the idea that, this grand experiment of, radically reimagining what it's like to interact with other people amongst a group of people who've had a lifetime of negative social experiences. And the trauma that lives in the nervous system related to attempts at social interaction for many people. That is the very group of people who can decide to do it differently, and it takes time. We do it together. And so with that, thank you. Thank you everyone for being here tonight, being part of this conversation, and being part of this community. And we will apply this conversation to a particularly loaded area. We're going to be talking about trust in healthcare. And I know that for so many community members, there has been breaches of trust in healthcare, and we will hear from. It's actually like a part 2 of the panel. It's a lot of the same panelists from tonight who had comments related to health that we broke off into a special panel. So we will look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye.